Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we step into one of the most disturbing, psychologically intense, and heartbreaking unsolved mysteries of modern true crime. A story not driven by brutality or spectacle, but by fear, desperation, and a man who seemed absolutely convinced that death was chasing him. This is Inside the Mysterious Death of Blair Adams, a man who knew he was going to die, a case that begins not with a crime scene, but with panic, paranoia, and a desperate attempt to escape something no one else could see. Our story begins in the summer of 1996 in Surrey, British Columbia, where Blair Adams, a 31-year-old construction worker, lived what appeared to be a quiet, ordinary life, described by friends and family as hardworking, polite, and responsible, with no criminal background, no history of violence, and no known enemies. Yet suddenly, without warning, Blair began acting in ways that terrified those closest to him, repeatedly telling his parents that someone was trying to kill him, that his life was in danger, and that he needed to leave immediately, though he could never clearly explain who was after him or why. At first, his family believed Blair might be experiencing a mental health crisis, perhaps paranoia or stress-induced delusions, and out of concern, they contacted authorities, leading Blair to be briefly detained and evaluated at a hospital, where doctors found no evidence of drugs, alcohol, or severe mental illness, and ultimately released him, a decision that would later haunt everyone involved. After his release, Blair's fear did not subside, it intensified. He withdrew nearly all the money from his bank account, packed his belongings, and began a frantic journey across borders and cities, as if running from an invisible threat that never stopped following him. Blair attempted to travel to Germany, a destination he had no clear ties to, but was turned away at the airport for lacking proper documentation, an event that only seemed to increase his panic rather than calm it. And instead of returning home, Blair crossed into the United States, moving rapidly from place to place, leaving behind a trail of confusion and unanswered questions. Witnesses later recalled Blair behaving nervously, looking over his shoulder, appearing exhausted and frightened, sleeping outdoors despite having money, and avoiding prolonged contact with others, as if he believed staying still for too long would get him killed. Eventually, Blair arrived in Knoxville, Tennessee, a city with no known connection to his past, no friends, no family, no job prospects, and no obvious reason to be there. And yet, for reasons never explained, this is where his journey, and his life, would end. On the morning of July 11, 1996, Blair Adams' body was discovered in a construction parking lot, partially unclothed, covered in dirt, and suffering from severe internal injuries caused by blunt force trauma, injuries consistent with a violent assault. Yet the scene raised immediate red flags. There were no defensive wounds, no signs of robbery, no clear weapon found, and most disturbingly, thousands of dollars in cash were discovered scattered around his body, money that had not been taken, contradicting the idea of a random attack or mugging. Investigators were left stunned, because the crime scene told no clear story. If Blair was attacked, why wasn't he robbed? And if this was a random act of violence, why was it so targeted, so brutal, yet so strangely incomplete? The medical examiner ruled Blair's death a homicide, confirming that his injuries were inflicted by another person. But beyond that, the case immediately stalled, because no witnesses came forward, no suspects were identified, and no surveillance footage captured the events leading up to his death. As police dug deeper into Blair's final days, they uncovered more unsettling details. Blair had been seen wandering the area, appearing confused and frightened, at times knocking on doors asking for help, at other times refusing assistance, a man trapped between wanting safety and fearing exposure. The most haunting aspect of the case remained Blair's own words, his repeated insistence that someone was trying to kill him, statements that were dismissed as paranoia while he was alive, but seemed chillingly prophetic after his death. The question that continues to haunt this case is whether Blair's fear was irrational or whether he truly sensed a real danger that authorities failed to recognize in time. Some theories suggest Blair may have been suffering from an undiagnosed mental illness that led him into dangerous situations, while others argue that mental illness alone cannot explain the physical evidence of a homicide, the deliberate injuries, and the fact that someone else clearly ended his life. More disturbing theories propose that Blair may have witnessed something he was not meant to see, become entangled with the wrong people, or crossed paths with someone who followed him across borders, patiently waiting for the moment to strike, while skeptics question how such a threat could remain completely invisible to everyone else. What makes Blair Adams' case uniquely tragic is not just the mystery of who killed him, but the realization that he spent his final days in absolute terror, convinced his death was inevitable, desperately trying to outrun it, only to be proven right in the most devastating way possible. Psychologically, this case forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth, that fear is sometimes dismissed too quickly, that warnings are sometimes ignored, and that not all cries for help are taken seriously until it is far too late. Decades later, Blair Adams' murder remains unsolved, his killer unidentified, his reasons for fleeing never fully understood, and his final moments lost forever to silence. His story lingers because it sits at the crossroads of mental health, crime, and human vulnerability, challenging us to ask whether Blair was running from an imagined threat, or whether the system failed to protect a man who knew, deep down, that something terrible was coming. And now, as we step away from the empty parking lot in Knoxville and return to the present, we are left with a chilling realization: Blair Adams did not just die mysteriously, he died afraid, unheard, and alone, carrying a warning no one could interpret in time. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of the most haunting unsolved deaths in modern history. And as we close this story, remember this: some mysteries are terrifying not because they lack answers, but because they suggest that sometimes, the danger is real, the fear is justified, and the truth arrives only after it is too late.